my name is Graham. I'm the face behind Mummy Fitness, and I'm here to talk to you about exercise strategies with hernias, specifically abdominal hernias. And so an abdominal hernia would be an umbilical hernia, which is a hernia at the belly button, or a para-umbilical hernia, which is a hernia just above the belly button. There are many different types of hernias, so I just want to be specific today that those two types of hernias, abdominal hernias, are what I'm discussing strategies for pressure management during exercise. Now, just for us to cover what a hernia is, so we're on the same page, a hernia is a hole. It is a hole in the tissue in your body. And when we're talking about abdominal hernias, we're talking about a hole in the midline, in the linea alba, which is the fascia that connects your abdominal muscles. The most common type of hernias for postpartum women is an umbilical hernia, which is a hernia at the umbilicus, the belly button. And this happens because technically the belly button already is a hernia. It's a very small hole. It's the hole from which the umbilical cord attached you to your mother, and when the cord is cut, this tiny hole still exists. During pregnancy, the hole can stretch as everything else stretches, and so postpartum you might notice that that hole is bigger and things start to protrude out of it, and sometimes it presents itself as an innie belly button going into an outie belly button. You can also get a hernia just above the umbilical cord, that's called a para-umbilical hernia just because it's above the belly button. And again, it's tear a hole in the fascia, so it's a hole. So when you see a hernia and it bulges, it's bulging because there's no fascia in that spot to kind of stop the contents underneath it, which are mainly fat pushing out, and that's what you're seeing with a bulge. Hernias can bulge when there's an increase in abdominal pressure, and so it presents itself because things are being forced out at the midline. I myself have a large umbilical and a para-umbilical. I have two hernias in my abdomen, and I do a lot of weightlifting and strength training, and I've learned how to recognize how pressure has been distributed in my body, and I work through strategies to manage that pressure so it doesn't make my hernia bigger, it's not problematic for me, and I'm able to pretty much do any kind of movement that I train. As I'll demonstrate on myself, because I have a hernia, I can show you my hernia, which is, you see this bulge here? This is what would be a para-umbilical hernia because my belly button is here, and my hernia is just my largest hernia. I have one at the belly button, a smaller one, and a bigger one above it. And as I'm talking, you can see that protrusion there because as I'm talking, I'm sending pressure to my midline. My abs are responding to my speech because it's part of a pressure management system that my voice box is part of, my pelvic floor is part of, and my abs are part of. From top to bottom, your body manages pressure and manages changes in pressure. I also have a diastasis, and learning pressure management with a diastasis recti and a hernia, it's similar, if not identical strategies. Because a diastasis is a thinning of a fascia, so when you see the doming or the distension, it's an indication that pressure is being sent towards the midline, which is the exact same thing when you see doming or distension in a hernia. But as I showed you when I was talking, just because a hernia is bulging, is distending, it doesn't mean it's something to be worried about. Like I can press into my hernia as I'm talking, and it's not pushing my finger out, my finger sinks into it. So this is some strategies I'm going to discuss now. I'm going to sit up and grab some weights so I can show you just some different ways to work through exercises and strength training movement, being mindful of what's happening at your midline. So a hernia, again, by definition, is a hole. That's literally what it means. It's a hole in your tissue. You can have hernias anywhere. You can have abdominal hernias, such as umbilical and para-umbilical hernias. You can have hiatal hernias, you can have incisional hernias. An incisional hernia, hiatal hernia is usually up high. An incisional hernia is a hernia where you've had surgery and where the incision is, a hole rips through. So hernias are holes, and because it's a hole, you can see what is happening beneath the hole. When things push out of the hernia, it's usually fat, it can be tissue, it can be organs. A couple of notes about hernias. If you have a hernia, the first thing I I would suggest is to go and see a doctor and get the doctor assessed just to confirm that it is a hernia. Unless it's a large and obvious hernia that like I have, small hernias usually need to be diagnosed by an ultrasound or CT scan. They are not something that a doctor can generally just feel and know it's for sure a hernia. Something else about a hernia is my hernia can be quite startling for some people because it's so large. But hernias, a large hernia is often much less problematic than a small hernia. Because a hernia is a hole, it means that things beneath it can push into the hole and become entrapped. So a hernia can become problematic if something beneath it, such as an organ, becomes trapped in it. And you know that something has been trapped in the hernia, but it starts becoming painful. So you can see as I'm talking, I push into my hernia, I touch it, it doesn't bother me at all, it's just what it is. If your hernia is red, it's inflamed, it's irritating you, it's important to go and see a doctor right away. Sometimes what can happen is that an organ, part of your stomach, depending where the hernia is, has been caught in the hole. And for a large hernia, the organ or fat can push in and slip out. It goes in, it goes out. So I talk, it's in, out. That's not an issue. But when a hernia is small, sometimes something can get pushed into it and then it gets stuck and it gets pinched. And when it can't come out, it stops receiving blood supply, and that part of the tissue can start to die. And your body tells you that by causing it to become red, inflamed, giving you pain. So if you have pain in the hernia side, it's very important that you go to see a doctor about it. I let them know that it's painful. So I'll show you my hernia response to my breath. So if I inhale and relax, the hernia, like my whole belly, will extend out. If I exhale and pull the air away from my midline, the hernia pulls in. Not as much as the rest of my stomach because, like I said, there's fat underneath it, there's tissue underneath it. I'm not going to be pulling all my tissues in, all my fat in, because there's no fascia, there's no muscle to pull it in, there's muscle here. So it pulls it in and it's firm and supported. Hernias, although you cannot close a hernia, the only way to close a hernia is medically. You would have to have a doctor close it physically. You cannot close a hernia through exercise. But hernias do respond to exercise because like an abdominal hernia where there's a hole in the fascia responds to load and it can thicken. And there's research that has shown that people that have had hernias for a long time, sometimes the hernia, the hole itself, the walls around supporting that hole thicken, so the hernia is less susceptible to getting bigger, and it's better, the walls of the hernia are better supported. So you can strengthen the area around a hernia, you can strengthen the walls of a hernia, but you cannot close a hernia. I'll show you a couple of things. I have my barbell here to show you, like, there's a couple of things. Sometimes people say don't lift with hernias. There's a couple of ways you can lift weight. There's this. You can see I'm relaxed, my hernia is distending, I'm sending pressure out towards my midline. Or I can change up how I was lifting that weight, change up my breath strategy. And now the hernia, not as much pressure is being sent out towards my midline, my belly is not doming as much, I feel better supported. I did that, those are things, I just changed up my breath strategy for that. So before you add load, I'm going to talk to you about different ways that you can work on breathing and connecting to your body to get a different response during the exercises that you are doing. Because a hernia is a hole, you are seeing the pressure underneath the hole. So a hernia can really help you become aware of how much pressure you're sending into your midline. A bulging hernia or distending hernia is not something that you need to be worried about. It's just feedback, your body giving you feedback. And this feedback can help you be more effective in your training. So because a hernia is a hole, when you increase pressure in your abdomen, in your core, in your trunk, the hernia will distend out. And it might distend out, it will distend out pretty much with anything. Like I was saying, I was talking and it was distending because as I'm speaking, the pressure is changing within my core and my body is responding to that. When I'm exercising, sometimes it will distend out, it will go in. And I'm not trying to avoid the distension, I'm just trying to be aware of how much it is. So what is important with a hernia is feeling the hernia, feel for feedback. So when you're exercising and you become you see that hernia bulging, feel it and see what's happening. If it's bulging out and you feel it and it's very, very firm, it's something that you should be mindful of, and be aware that that might be an indication that you are sending a lot of pressure towards your midline. You might be reaching maximal pressures towards your midline, and that just might not be what you're trying to do. If you feel the hernia and it's distending but it's soft, that's an indication that there is pressure there, because every single movement your body changes the pressure. Pressure is used to support your internal organs, support your bones. So it shows that there's pressure there, but that pressure may not be reaching maximum limits. That pressure may be better distributed, and so it may be an indication that you're at a good spot for the exercise that you need to be doing. So I'll give you an example of that. I can, because I'm aware of my hernia, I'm in tune with my body, I'm able to manipulate this response. I can use myself as a demonstration. Say I was looking at heavyweight bicep curl, deadlift, and you come up, I can do a lot, and that, it just really sticks out, and I press it, and it's fairly firm. Like I push back, and the most I come is maybe kind of pushing it back to where the skin is, but it's very firm. And then there's other ways I could be lifting it, and again, it's sticking out, but if I push it, my finger easily goes all the way in. It goes beyond where my muscles are, because my muscles give me resistance. The hernia, there's no resistance there because it's a hole. And so those were there's quick things I did with my body that made my hernia distend, but the distension was different, and for me it also felt different. I could feel the pressure out at my midline when I was forcing it out, and I could feel less of that pressure at my midline the second time, though the hernia was still distending, because I wasn't sending that pressure out. I was doing my best to distribute it throughout my trunk. The strategies for which you distribute that pressure really vary, because it depends on the exercise, it depends on what you're currently doing and how your body is responding. So I know that seems very vague. I hope it's not, I'm trying not to be. My tip for this is feel for feedback, but if you really want more specific guidance with exercising and understanding your hernia during exercise, then you can definitely reach out to me. I'm Minemesik Graham. I'm on Facebook, Mummy Fitness. I'm on Instagram at mummy_fitness, and you can also email me at mummyfitness@live.com. Thank you for joining me today, and enjoy the rest of the conference. I can't wait to chat to you guys in the question and answer period. We could definitely talk about more about hernias and pressure management, and just any and all questions you have about it.